Myślę, że teraz pora na naszego kolejnego gościa z sąsiedzkiego, bratniego, jak to się kiedyś mówiło, kraju. Tomasz Sedlacek, ekonomista, doradca strategiczny w Československa Obchodní banka, a także doradzał najwyższym władzom Czech. Bardzo prosimy.
Thank you very much. My role will be easy. I will be speaking for 5 to 7 minutes, and I ask the chair very kindly to tell me when I'm in my 5th minute so I know when to stop stopping. This is interesting if we compare, Andy Warhol once spoke about 15 minutes of glory. Now this happened twice in the recent history of 20 years. 3 years ago, some journalist asked me which country will be very strong in growing out of the Visegrad region. And I said, well, in the beginning, it was the Czech Republic. We were the heroes of the transformation in the early 90s. We did our very brave and stupid, voucher privatization, etc. So everybody was looking at us. We were the liberal heroes. Then it was Hungary because of their foreign direct investment strategies. And then it was Slovakia for some time because of the reforms. And this was the time when the guy was asking me about the future, which is, of course, stupid because we know nothing about future. But jokingly, I said, well, now, of course, the turn is Poland. Poland will be the next country that will be looked upon. And in fact, this is the only prophecy that came true because Poland was the only country, which, by the way, nobody expected. Everybody is full of explanations now, but in 2008, nobody expected that the only country to grow in the whole EU or OECD would be Poland. So congratulations, and let's start the circle again, if that's okay. Quite similar if you actually look at the presidency. It started with, from the new countries, it started with Slovenia. Then it was the Czech Republic. By the way, you don't have to worry that you will screw up your presidency. You can't possibly do worse than what we did. So my only advice is, this was very nice what you said, but it's even more sublime. Just don't kill your own presidency in the middle of it. Obviously does not leave a very nice memory. Hungary, Poland, and the last country to close will be Slovakia. Ironically and rhymingly so, because Slovakia, together with Slovenia, that started the whole round, is most integrated in terms of euro. Now, Czech Republic's presidency was supposed to be one of the most important presidencies. It was the Lisbon Treaty. It was the last presidency before the Lisbon Treaty actually took place. But we somehow, it's like when we take turns in inviting each other for dinner. You cook, it's not very good, and you cook, and it's not very good. You cook, it's not very good. And when I invite you all to dinner, I burn the whole food, and you have nothing. This, I feel, is what we have done. But let's forget about the past and let's look into the future. And of course, the fiscal consolidation is something that is a topic which you chose. Now, of course, the basic thing to realize about Europe that it is semi-integrated, which is as stupid as being semi-pregnant. We have, of course, two hands how government can influence. Not direct, but influence the economy. One is fiscal, and the other one is monetary. Now, we have very wisely chosen to bind our monetary hand. The politician is cannot decide on printing money. This is something that we did a couple of generations back. It is not a good idea when a politician can print money. It is simply too much of a temptation to have a legal printing machine in-house. You know very well, this is of course the famous Jacques Lacan quote, I know very well, but still. I know very well with every crown or every zloty that I print, I add to general inflation, but who cares? Because we have integrated and depoliticized monetary policy, i.e. the right to print money, this is the reason why Europe and our countries do not have a problem with inflation. That is, on the other hand, exactly the reason why we have problems with debt, because now we're fighting everything with just one hand. So we forbid ourselves the right to print money, but the government can absolutely uncontrolled print debt, which of course, at the end of the day, works similarly. Now, if you face a temptation which is too high for you to bear, and I claim here that both monetary and fiscal temptation is simply too high to bear, then it's best to get rid of it. Let me, because we still have a couple of young students among us, let me actually make a comparison how fiscal policy is similar to the Lord of Power from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. If you realize the ring was such a temptation, it was so powerful that no one of the really wise ever even touched it. Gandalf didn't touch it, Aragorn didn't touch it, Galadriel didn't touch it, Elrond didn't touch it. Only stupid Frodo and Bilbo, who had no clue what they had. You know, Bilbo thought it's a nice little entertainment ring to make you disappear in parties. He was the only one who touched it. But otherwise, everybody else knew this ring must be destroyed. It cannot be controlled by anybody. It controls you. It is an object petit a. You think you're controlling it. No, it ends up controlling you. This is, of course, the big topic of Kundera. You start a game, you think you're playing the game. Whoops, at the end of the game is playing you. This is the problem with debt, on what you focused. Another interesting take on this is that in Greek and Latin, and also even in Aramaic, there's the same word for debt as there is for sin. So the proper translation of the Lord's Prayer is, forgive us our debt, debita nostra, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. So debt and sin have this similar, very luring, you think you're controlling it, no, it's actually controlling you. One more minute. There is an interesting fiscal rule in, now that I started throwing the Bible at you, and I think I can, I'm in Poland, right? In Genesis 32, there's a wonderful story, the first ever business cycle in the history of mankind. I study, or I teach, the history of economic thought, so of course with the current crises, I wanted to look for the very oldest business cycle. And the very oldest business cycle is one you all know. Maybe you recall from your Sunday school. Good years, bad years. The 7 fat cows and the 7 thin cows. This is, ladies and gentlemen, the very first business cycle we know of. Nothing older than this. And so, you know, Pharaoh has the dream. You all know the story. He doesn't know what to think of it. Joseph comes to him and says, congratulations. You've just had a macroeconomic prediction 14 years ahead of time. You will have 7 good GDP/grain years and 7 very bad years. And Pharaoh says, well, thank you. That's very nice to know. What will I do with it? Please, I now make you my finance minister or deputy member of a government responsible for fiscal consolidation. Please help me, tell me what to do. And Joseph's advice was actually very Keynesian. He said, during the good years, do not eat everything that grows, but save 1/5 of it. This is exactly stated in the book of Genesis. So that in the bad years, you will not have to die of hunger. In other words, decrease the amplitude of the business cycle. You know, trivial Keynesian politics rediscovered 4,000. We economists are very quick. It took us 4,000 years to rediscover it. Okay, one more thought, and then I'll finish. Today, however, we don't abide by Keynes. People criticize Keynes because he's left. I say, well, you can do that, but the fact is our fiscal or our economic policy is left of Keynes. Keynes today would be considered a right-winger because he would, during the good years, we also, by the way, our generation had 7 very good years, and they were framed by 2 very significant events. One was September 11, 2001. This is not just the year when the American security feeling, involvement in the world, but also Fed's interest rate policy changed. This was also the last year when America had a surplus budget. This was the last year of Clinton. So 2001 was a very significant year, and followed by 7 very good years, not only for America, especially our region, but also for the whole world. It was exceptionally strong periods of growth. Interestingly enough, ended, or the kind of the symbol of the crisis was fall of the Lehman Brothers, which happened when? 2008, and do you remember the month?
November.
September. So sort of to the month exactly, September 9/11 to September 2008. Of course, I'm not saying that the crisis will take 7 years. It just so happened that it rhymes. So we had 7 very good years, and if Keynes was alive, and if Joseph was alive, he would say, well, during these good years, create something that we've not heard of for a long time, and that's called fiscal surplus, not deficit, which we did. So we acted contrary to Joseph's rule. In the good years, not only did we not save anything, not only did we consume everything that grew, but we actually continued indebting our economy. So this is why I call current fiscal policy bastard Keynesianism, because I know it's difficult to slow down and speed up, so we're just speeding up all the time. We're doing deficits all the time, which has nicely resulted today. We're all talking about deficit reduction. This is considered to be very heroic. Of course, we all know that deficit reduction still means continuing indebting, but a little less, please. Not heard one single politician who would actually say, well, let's try and aim at surplus budgets when the times are right. So I am a member of the National Economic Council, which is a sort of an advisory body to our government, and we proposed Joseph's rule, which is something that you might take into consideration, where GDP growth plus deficit should equal a constant. Let's say 4. So in a year when you have a 6% GDP growth, that year you should produce 2% surplus. If your GDP is falling by 3%, that year you may afford 7% deficit. This is going back to Joseph. This is going back to proper Keynesianism, which is much stricter, because what we did now, we just breach it downwards. There is no single rule that is being debated that actually forces governments to create surpluses. So, last sentence, it is completely obtrusively perverse to be happy about GDP growth today, because there is no such thing in Europe or anywhere in the world. How can we talk of GDP growth of 3% when in that same year we have 7% deficit? This then is not gross, GDP does not stand for gross domestic product, but gross debt product. And this is what we've been growing constantly in the last generation. Thank you.
Szczerze mówiąc, spodziewałem się od przedstawiciela Czech, że będzie cytował Haszka, a nie współczesne, którego my tutaj bardzo lubimy. Nie widzę, szczerze mówiąc, tutaj dobrego wyjścia z tego, co pan powiedział, chociaż zgadzam się z tymi opiniami. I chciałem powiedzieć, że u nas nie wystarczyłoby rządowi związać obu rąk, żeby uniemożliwić robienie mu pewnych problemów, które robi. A jeszcze trzeba było mu zamknąć usta. Niestety. A to już jest zupełnie niemożliwe. Ja myślę, że chciałem poprosić o następnego ekonomistę.